He's won 6 high school football championships in the last 8 seasons that he's coached at that level, including this past season at Owasso High School in Oklahoma. Between the 3rd and 4th titles, one at Union High School in Tulsa in 2005 and the other at Fayetteville High School in Arkansas 11 years later, he was also the head coach at Tulsa University, where his team won 11 games in 2012, and he was named the Conference Coach of the Year. With all that success, Bill Blankenship also beat cancer, quit a successful program after winning the 3rd state title in 4 years without a job waiting, and was also unceremoniously fired just 2 seasons at Tulsa after that 11-win season. Bill Blankenship's story is one of allowing God to move him in his life, and every community he lands in is better for it. My conversation with Bill here on Suit Up is up next.
This is Mitch Wilburn, preaching minister at the Park Church of Christ, proud sponsor of Suit Up. I'd like to extend an invitation to you to join us for worship at the Park. We're a Bible-based church that loves the Lord and loves people. We have one service on Sunday morning at 9 a.m., and that's followed by classes for everyone, from newborn to 100 years of age. The park sits on a rather large lot near the corner of Garnett and the Creek Turnpike and offers a Sunday evening service at 6 p.m., and Wednesday night we meet at 7 p.m. Our youth have their own building with multiple men and women leading them, and our kids, age 1 to 5th grade, have their own educational wing that even has its own working carousel and ice cream parlor. And I love both. Kevin, the host of this podcast, is in charge of our sports ministry that goes on all year round with basketball, volleyball, softball, great activities. So come see us at the park on the corner of Garnett and the Creek Turnpike, or check us out on the web at parkplaza.org.
Bill, born in Spiro, Oklahoma in 1956. Tell us about Spiro, Oklahoma in the 50s and 60s.
Oh, we're probably close to Mayberry. That's small town Oklahoma on the Arkansas border, technically born in Fort Smith, 20 miles away, and living in Spiro. My dad was the coach at the school. My mom was an English teacher. I always kind of enlighten folks in today's world when I say Dad was the coach. In those days, he was the coach. He was head football coach, boys basketball, girls basketball, all the way down through junior high. If it could be thrown or kicked or hit or shot or whatever, that was the way it was in our family. I was the middle of 3 boys, and so we were a testosterone-driven, ball-playing, bunch of kids.
And Mom couldn't have anything nice in the house?
No, not at all. And she was definitely a boy's mom. She had been a pretty good athlete to hear her tell the stories, but she wanted us to have some culture and some, learn how to act and to speak and to do all those kind of things. And so I'm very thankful for that.
Well, and they did quite well.
Well, she would take pride in the fact that we were actually doing something with public speaking, of some sort.
And I know growing up in that kind of household, because I too was one of 3 brothers. All right, so Dad's a coach. Mom is digging athletics as well. So I guess it was just natural for all 3 brothers to play whatever was in season. Yeah,
it really was. I don't remember anybody ever trying to get us to do it. I think we just wanted to hang out with Dad, and especially small town, you'd get out of school and grade school and walk over to the gym if he was coaching basketball, or to the football field, and we'd just hang out and ride the bus and do all those kind of things until it was time. I always wanted to play and didn't know any better. And so I think all 3 of us were just driven to do that. And, my oldest brother went to Harvard, and Mom was very proud of that, as was Dad as well. But he was a quarterback at Harvard. Okay. I wound up getting a chance to go to the University of Tulsa, and my little brother came to Tulsa as well. And so 2 of us stayed a little closer, and Rex was a Ivy League boy.
Now, was the younger a quarterback as well?
No, well, he was in high school.
Okay.
And he actually played defensive end at Tulsa. So he thinks he was the best quarterback of all, but we eventually. I think being the youngest, you have to learn to fight your way through everything, and so he much like my own son has a little more of that defensive bent to him.
Yeah. So, what about other sports growing up? You obviously played them. Why did you gravitate towards football, and what other sports did you play, and how good were you?
Well, I loved basketball. Played basketball all through high school. I played baseball up through junior high, and then there was a short time in Spiro that we didn't have American Legion ball. And so I didn't play late in my high school career until my senior year, and it was one of the greatest summer of my life. But I went over to Poto, which was just one of the neighboring towns, had some friends on the team, and got to play Legion ball with some friends over there. And I think the whole football thing was just because I got recruited and gave me a chance to play at the next level. And I think if you'd let me do what I wanted to do, I thought I was sure. I thought I was Larry Bird. I should be able to play basketball my whole life.
Which is interesting because you guys were in college about the same time.
Yeah, oh yeah. I watched Larry Bird. In fact, a teammate of mine was playing basketball at the time, and he takes great pride in Illinois State had come in, Illinois State. Indiana State, yeah. Thank you. And, he tells people he held Larry Bird like 4 points under his average that night. I think the guy only scored 36.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about, and I've heard that same story. All right, so football at the University of Tulsa. When did Angie come into the picture?
Good story. Angie's a Navy brat, but her dad was from Spiro, and so he retired, and they moved back there where he grew up when she was in the 7th grade. So we actually dated some in high school, kind of split up and went our separate ways. She's a Northeastern State grad, and I came to Tulsa, and I had to go back and reel her in, though. I had to find some reason for her to say yes, and so eventually got her to.
Now, one of the things that I've always admired about you, Bill, is how you have openly shared your faith with people wherever you've been. And it seems like most of the time, most people that I've met who have done that, when they get, into their, 50s and older, you can look back and go, well, there was a pretty strong foundation built at home.
Yep.
Did you grow up in a Christian home?
I did. Mom and Dad were, just really committed to Christ and their church. And so I grew up in church. And when I say that, I mean literally if there was a service going on Sunday night, Wednesday, we were there. That's just what you did, small town. And Dad was a deacon, and Mom taught Sunday school and the whole thing. And so, but I do, they taught us well, but there's things that influence you, and I still remember watching my dad write a check regularly once a month to the church. And it was the biggest check I ever saw him write for anything. Mm-hmm. And not that was, but it just influenced me early that they were givers and they were committed to that. And so, I don't know that I realized it at the time, but I think that was a big influence on me as I continued to move forward and get jobs and all that, to realize that, if that was a big deal to my mom and dad, it probably ought to be a big deal to me too.
Your faith would really be tested a couple of different times as you went in to adulthood. And before we get to those, though, I do want to go back to Angie. And when did you get married, and when did you start a family?
We were 3 years out of high school and got engaged, or 2 years out of high school, got engaged, and then married when we were both 21. I still had another year and a half or so to play. I stretched my college days into 5 years. She got her degree in 3.5, and so she was, as she would remind everybody, she was working while I was still playing. And so we got married pretty early, I guess, and that was in 78, and so we were married about 2 years, and then Josh came along in 1980, and slowly but surely we built up to 3 boys, and it seemed to be a trend. My dad had 3, and now I had 3.
So coaching comes into play right out of your playing days at TU. How long before you take your first coaching job?
Well, I actually, due to some influences in my life that I was very glad came along, I went to work for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes for 3 years. And right out of college, and did that and had an opportunity to really work in mostly northeastern Oklahoma, but throughout the state. And then got a chance, an old teammate of mine, Bob Bartz, was an attorney in town, and he was on the school board at Eastwood Baptist, and called me and said, they were looking for a football coach, and did you ever think you might want to do that? And so in a complete, I think it's just completely weird how all this happens. My first ever job's head coaching job at Eastwood. And I couldn't figure out why they waited so long, because I had a lot of confidence in myself. And
now, where is that?
Well, it used to be over on Eastwood Baptist Church is on 11th Street, over on the east side of town. Okay. And it was a huge church, and they had a high school. And it actually is the beginnings of how Metro Christian came about, because there was a split in the school, and a bunch of folks came over and started what became Metro, and they were still trying to piece things together at Eastwood, and they hired a young guy that had played quarterback at Tulsa, and I guess I wanted to coach, and I wasn't very good at it. We won 2 games the first year, and I tell people we won 3 the second year if you get to count the forfeit. And so I count the forfeit because I don't want my resume looking like I can't improve this thing. So it was pretty wild.
So then how did you land at Spiro as the head football coach?
Well, all right. So I worked 2 years, and the interesting thing, Kevin, is that clearly – I don't know how to explain it other than just to tell you my heart was, God had really shown me that coaching was what he had made me to do. And I just was loving this deal. And we weren't even successful. And the school closed down. And so now, I think this is typical in our life spiritually. About the time you think you got here comes some adversity, and see if you can deal with it. So I had to go find a job. And short version is I get on at Sapulpa as an assistant coach to a guy named Steve Spavital, who was in his first job as a head coach. And we didn't know each other, but he gave me a chance to come in and coach with him, and it struck up a friendship that's still going on today. After a year, the job in my hometown opened up in Spiro, and I called the superintendent and asked him if he'd give me a chance. If I thought I'd be the guy, and I've been coaching 3 years. And he said, well, I think you need a little more experience. I think you got a chance to be a really good coach. And I said, I really think I'm the guy now. And he said, well, I think you need more experience. I said, Dad, I really want the job. And I have to talk my dad into hiring me, but I did. And amazingly, when I think back in today's world of Twitterverse and Facebook and Snap and everything goes on, can you imagine what would have happened to the superintendent of schools for hiring his son to be the head football coach? Had been coaching 3 years, and 2 of those were completely losing records. Yeah. And yet he gave me a chance, and fortunately, we did a pretty good job. And over a course of 4 years, we got that team to go to a state championship. We didn't win it, but we got it going pretty good.
While things were going pretty good for you there, things really turned for you in a bad way off the field. Just in your 30s, family is pretty new. You got 3 boys, but they're all under the age of 8, and all of a sudden, here comes cancer.
Yep. Completely out of the blue. Get diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Actually came to Tulsa for chemo treatments, a couple of surgeries, People would tell you in the cancer world, I probably got a pretty good draw. I mean, this is something they do have a pretty good rate of success with if we catch it early. I'm not sure that meant a whole lot to my wife or my mom or my dad or people. The one thing I realized pretty quickly was it probably wasn't it was a lot harder on everybody else than it was me. Now, it was still hard on me, don't get me wrong, but I was too busy trying to get well.
Yeah.
That I didn't, not to think about all of the things that could happen with 3 young kids at home and all that kind of stuff. But very, very thankful, and sometimes a little mystified why God would choose to heal me and to give me a chance to have the kind of life I've had. 2 years later, I got a job at Edmond. And again, the short version is I have a young man gets diagnosed with the same cancer I had. I get to be with him, go through the treatments and all that. We got really, really close. He had to have a bone marrow transplant and didn't survive. And so, I really struggled with, the fact that how does this stuff work, where we both have the same disease. God chooses to keep me around, and this 16-year-old doesn't.
Right.
And so that's hard. But I think over time, God's allowed some of these things to be used if I'm willing to share it. And, I am a cancer survivor. I can talk to people about what it's like to go through chemo and, have those diagnoses, and you just try to be willing to do that.
And I appreciate the fact that you have seen that in your life, and you've taken the challenge on to it. A lot of times it reminds me of the very end of Saving Private Ryan, when the character played by Tom Hanks tells the Private Ryan, earn it.
Right. Right.
Go out and prove that you deserved to survive.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying here.
Well, it is. And I mean, survivor guilt is real. I mean, I'm not trying to, it's been a long time for me, but, when Jeff passed, that was hard. But, I do think that over and over, God just continues to show you that he's got this incredible plan, that you get to be a part of in some small way. And so just try to keep plugging away.
You talked about your stint at Edmond Memorial High School in the early 90s, and that would lead you to Tulsa in a long and very successful career as the head football coach at Union, and also athletic director as well.
Yeah, it was one of those things where you kind of bounce around and how in the world the door opens and I'm able to get to Union. The resume is not there, the opportunity, but just getting to know some people and getting a chance. One of our friends, Doc Blevins, always claims that he prayed me into there. And so
and I believe it.
I'll give him credit for that.
Absolutely.
But Union was an awesome place for us. We got to raise our family there. I was there 14 seasons. And, we gradually, slowly got the program over the hump and had a lot of losses in state championship games early, and then found a way to win some of them at the end. And
got to coach your boys.
Yes, I did. And I don't take that for granted. I think that's people that get to take their kids to work, you get to watch them work with you. I think that's a pretty good joy that you get to have. And so getting to do that, through their college or through their high school days was pretty special.
And I know when my dad, he just coached us in like elementary school football, but I know that there was, and I also coached my son, not in high school, but in other sports. And it sometimes can be a little bit tricky because while you want your son to maybe not be the best athlete on the court or on the field, you want them to be the one that hustles the most and the one that is first in line and tries to finish first and all of those things. It can be a little bit tricky in that regard when you're coaching your own kids.
It can be, and it was for me when I first started. I was so cautious because I didn't want to be the dad that was giving his son the breaks. And so I probably went too far the other way. Josh was a freshman, and he'd moved up, and we were talking about Coach Spav a few minutes ago, and I'd been coaching him hard, and I've been having high expectations, and I'd probably yelled at him quite a bit. And he got me in the office one day, and he said, you're a pretty good quarterback coach. And I said, I know, because I felt like I was, and because I'd had a pretty good run of quarterbacks there. And he goes, yeah. He said, why are you coaching Josh different than you did all those other ones? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's going, I never heard you yell at Justin Fuente like that. I never heard you yell at, Sheridan Poteet like that. And I'm like, oh, well. And so he kind of reeled me in, and it kind of got my attention to try to do a better job of coaching him well, but I didn't need to make it harder on him than it should have been. And so I was able to enjoy his last couple of years more than I did his first couple.
So we actually met in 2005, your last year at Union. I moved to Tulsa. I became the play-by-play voice for the Redskins on KRMG. And so that was a blessing for me to get our relationship started. And then it would be the next year when I would become the program director of the sports animal here in Tulsa. And you made one of the boldest moves I've ever seen a man make professionally, and that is to just decide, you know what, I want to be a college coach. I believe I believe that is what you believed, because I know you as a prayerful man, and as we've gone through this conversation, you've kind of let it be known that at an early age, you were looking for guidance from God in a lot of directions. So I know that you had laid this out based on your feeling from God that the only way I'm going to get a job is to quit coaching at Union. And that was a huge leap of faith.
Well, there's some practical sides to it, and then there was the faith side. But in practicality, I was at what I thought was the very best program in the state. And I thought along with that might make me a little bit untouchable by people that didn't know I was willing to leave that place. And I'd looked at a couple of other opportunities over the previous 4 or 5 years, and the timing had been wrong.
What were some of those? Can you tell us?
My buddy Denver Johnson had offered me a spot at Illinois State, and I still, Adam hadn't graduated, and I just couldn't quite get through of not being a part of that. My son Josh had just gotten into high school, and Dave Rader had an opening at Tulsa, and it was just, the timing wasn't right. Yeah. And so there were things like that had happened, and there'd been enough of them that I just kind of put it on the shelf and thought, well, this is probably never going to happen. And it was early in the year in 2005, and Angie and I were, I was doing the shave and brush your teeth thing, and she's over in her deal getting the makeup, and we're getting ready for school. And I have no idea what the conversation was, but she gave me one of those, maybe it's just time. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she said, well, maybe your time at Union's coming to an end. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, well, maybe we ought to be praying about it. And I'm like, it was kind of like Rocky and Adrian saying you can go fight, and, ding, 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 ding. It's like the bells went off. Yeah. But we did. We just committed to start putting some time into prayer of, if you're not going to retire at Union, and at the time I'm just barely not even 50, and I couldn't see myself this being my last job. Well, what would I leave for? And so we just began to pray and see if that was, if it was going to be the right time. And and thankfully she documented this, and we've got, that we can share it with our kids and family. But, just one thing after another, God just began to show us. And the first we were just reading through the Bible, so there wasn't but we're in the Old Testament. And the very first week that we're reading and saying we're going to pray about it, the first verse is, you've been on this mountain too long. It's time to break camp and advance. And you're like, whoa, was that? And I'm not going to just take a verse out and say, well, that's it. You know?
Right.
But you're going, okay. Well, then you start adding next week and the next week and the next week, and there were just all kinds of things happened that I don't think I've ever been more confident, Kevin, in a decision that seemed pretty wild. But we were absolutely, the two of us, convinced that God had led us to know that it was time to leave. And not sure what was going to open, but we thought it would. Mm-hmm. But that's when, you talk about faith, and I remember somebody in the press conference when I got hired at TU, they're like, well, what a deal of faith. I said, let me tell you about faith. It works a whole lot better when you look backwards than it does going forward, because, when you don't have a job, when you're, and you're just like, man.
Well, there were some paychecks that
absolutely.
being cashed.
And it just wasn't an easy process, but it was sure rewarding, because it just caused you to lean into God even more, in a wild way. And this, but you became a big part of that. I had a season that I wasn't going to have a job, and that was the beginning of the sports animal. And I got to do a little part-time gig up here, and it gave me something to do, and kind of kept me connected to the sports world a little bit. And it was fun to be part of that inaugural season.
And now, of course, we're not done with the build-out, but you see what the sports animal is becoming now.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's been a great transformation over the years. So you get the head coaching job you become an assistant at TU, and then become the head coach just a few seasons later. But tell me about taking the job as an assistant. Is that something that you initially wanted to do, that you thought, well, I'm going to get into D1 coaching, I might have to start out as an assistant?
I didn't have a problem with that at all. I was excited to. See, I'd been a head coach of the 23 years that I'd been coaching high school ball. I'd been the head coach 22 of those. Only been assistant one time. Mm-hmm. And I had grown into having other people getting to coach my quarterbacks. I started letting my own son coach them. And I was the thing that I had become the athletic director. I had lots of administrative duties and things that were in some ways kind of sucking the life out of the fun part of being a coach. And I look forward to a chance to have my own little small group of guys and get to coach them. And Todd Graham gave me a chance to be the receiver coach first year, and I just loved it. And then a year later, I got to duties of being the special teams coordinator, and that was even better, because now I'm getting to invest in some offensive guys and defensive guys, and I just got to build relationships across the team, and it was pretty special. Now, I missed calling plays and missed being in charge and all those kind of things as time went on, but those first 2 or 3, 4 years, I was an assistant for 3 years at least. It was exactly what I needed to do, because it really recharged my batteries and gave me some new insights on a lot of things that I could do better.
And I guess ultimately help prepare you to be the head coach.
I think so, yeah.
You got to see everything that was going on around you, and so you knew what you were going to be getting into, as opposed to jumping into it from high school into college. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
You're the head coach until 2014, and the team's record had slipped in the last 2 years, going 3-9 in 2013 and 2-10 in 2014. Can you tell us? And I don't want to know the details about your being let go, but really about how you really leaned on the Lord to get you through the firing.
I think the hard part in some ways is we had success early. We'd had 2 really good years. We'd won 11 games in the Liberty Bowl and the conference championship and, conference coach of the year and all that kind of stuff that I knew better than to take too much of that, but it feels pretty good, You get to be, you kind of get to be the big man around town and enjoy that moment. And then we don't win the next year, which was a real shock. But I thought sure we would turn it the second year. And we had everything that it just wouldn't happen. And this was my school, it was my alma mater. I'm a letterman. I'd played there. I'd, gone to school there. That's not a reason for somebody to get to keep you, but I'm just saying I love that place. Mm-hmm. I was passionate about it. Nobody would work harder at it than I would. And we were going through some hard times at the school. I just didn't really think they were going to let me go. I really didn't. I thought, man, I know that there's people chirping out there. There's always going to be, but I just didn't think it would happen with the success we'd had 2 years before, and it just didn't. And so it kind of came a little bit out of left field for me. It shouldn't have, because that's the business of college football. But I think emotionally it jarred me pretty good. And I think anybody that's been through getting fired or getting moved on or any of that kind of stuff knows what I'm talking about when your feelings are hurt. I mean, your pride's hurt. I was very thankful Justin Fuente, who had played for me before, was the head coach at Memphis. And he's like, Coach, get out of Tulsa, come over here and come help us. We're going to get ready for a bowl game. And then later that next year, he let me come and actually work on his staff. Mm-hmm. And I think there was some healing that came along with that, of just getting to plug in and get on. And I didn't think I would ever coach high school again. I hadn't thought about it. I thought I could get on, and it just never seemed to really open up for me again at the college level, which seemed strange because I'd had really some good times and good relationships. Mm-hmm. And really out of left field, some mutual friends, Rick Jones and some things, I had an opportunity to go to Fayetteville High School as their head coach, and they were in some turmoil, and it was a late deal. It was a June hiring, and there was nothing about it that made sense other than Angie and I just kind of felt like the Lord was nudging us that way. And we went over, and it was just a great year. We bought a house. We're going to go stay for 5 years and, build a retirement in Arkansas. We have all these plans that you're going to do. And it, out of left field again, Zach Duffield and Dr. Ogilvie at Owasso say, why don't you come back to Tulsa? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to come back to Tulsa, but man, I miss those grandkids. And they gave me a chance to come to Owasso. And once I came over and visited, I was like, man, that's what I need to do. So I got in trouble with my wife because now we got to sell a house that we just bought.
And you got to buy another one.
Well, we actually kept we've got the same house down in South Tulsa that we've had for 20 years.
I've been to that house. It's a nice house.
Well, we're very blessed. And so thankfully we had kept that. And, there's just been so much, I would call it healing. It's kind of hard to imagine. You still, if you stop and think about it, you get your old feelings hurt that, they didn't keep me. I had kids, I can give you all the things that you think. And then you go, well, would you trade getting to be at Memphis when we beat Ole Miss at being in the press box for that? Would you trade, 3 state championships in the last 4 years? Would you? And it's not about the trophies, but I mean, which of those kids, those teams that I've gotten to coach now, would I like to say, well, I'd rather still be the head coach at Tulsa than to get to do all that stuff.
Right.
And I think God just finds a way to move us when he needs to. Sometimes we like it, and sometimes we don't like it.
So I got to ask you this question.
Yep.
Philip Montgomery over the last 3 years has won 2 games, 3 games, and 4 games, and he still has a job.
Yeah.
You went 11-3, but then went 3-9, 2-10, and you were out.
Yeah.
Does that how does that sit with you when you?
I would have been
and
mad.
How do you deal with it?
I would have been mad if they fired him. I will tell you that. I want there to be, my ego says I want somebody, I want you to realize that we actually were doing, pretty good for whatever. Mm-hmm. But I thought if it was unfair for me to have not gotten that other year, I didn't want him to not get it. Philip Montgomery didn't fire me, and there's a natural rivalry, I guess, because to me, it was like he's getting to raise my kids. It's almost like, we went through a divorce and I don't get to go back Thanksgiving now to eat at the dinner table.
Right.
That's kind of what it felt like with me and TU, but I think I'm getting past that a little more, and I certainly want Coach Montgomery and his staff to be successful. I am an alum and I want them to do well. I want them to be, to make our city proud.
Well, I hope what people listening to this podcast will see through this conversation, and this is what I would highlight if this was a book, is that through all the things that you've done, I think the real encouragement, honestly, Bill, is for people to start a relationship with the Lord as early as possible. Yeah. I didn't do that. It was well into my adult years before I really realized it's about that relationship with me and God, and me doing the things to please Him, and then everything else will fall into place behind it. And I see that you made that commitment for that relationship a long time ago, and it has really served you well. And I hope that that's what people can also see in this. Not only, what you did through the cancer and through getting fired as well, but just the idea that this is what it really should be, and that is to develop that relationship early.
Well, I think that I don't know what I'm trying to say to you, Kevin. That I hope that that's what comes across. I think that it's been a growing experience that each of us go through, in our journey. Golly, what I hope is that somehow in my way of carrying on through life, that somehow I can reflect the love that I've been blessed with and given from Christ. And I think I do such a poor job a lot of times that, you just try to make up for it when you get a chance like this. And I literally lay in bed at night and I just like, how, God, did you give me such favor and blessing? All the great things that I've been able to be a part of that I, haven't. And I realize not all of it's been like that, but I think if we choose to focus on, the things that we can be thankful for, it probably makes our attitude and our focus and all that in life a whole lot easier to deal with. So that's what I strive to do, at least. I'll put it that way.
Well, Bill, thank you for being a part of this podcast. It means so much to me, and it will mean a lot to the people who listen to this. And God bless you, Bill Blankenship.
Well, thank you, Kevin. And I think what you're doing with the podcast is just what we're talking about, using your platform to somehow reflect some the great things that God's done for us and to tell more people about it. So good job, and thank you for the compliment.
Thank you.